Hi there, students. Let's talk about the classical era in terms of music. More appropriately, it's referred to as the neoclassical era. Neo meaning new. And architecturally, we can see that very clearly with the changes in architecture returning to these earlier styles of Greek and Roman buildings, much like what we see in contemporary American government buildings, this desire to imitate the Greek and Roman styles using columns, domes, and so on. Now musically, there was no real Greek or Roman style, clear Greek or Roman style that we could call back on. But what we can find is a great desire on the part of composers to create a structure-based music, one that emphasizes the clarity and beauty of organization, using musical elements of melody, rhythm, meter, and so on. We find this explosion of new musical forms in the classical era. It really begins, for our purposes, with the great composer Haydn. Haydn is kind of the father of the classical era. Mozart, sort of its peak, taking the existing forms and dealing with them. And finally, Ludwig van Beethoven takes classicism about as far as it can go and moves forward into another age. Here's Haydn, the father of the neoclassical era in music. Haydn worked most of his life for the Esterházy family, a wealthy Hungarian noble family who had their own orchestra. What Haydn did for them was to write symphonies, concertos, and other pieces of music for their entertainment. A new creation was a result of a shortened vacation at the Esterházy palace. It seems that the Esterházys got home early when most of the musicians were gone, and they requested an entertainment shortly after their return. Haydn scoured the palace and found that he, a violinist, another violinist, a cellist, and a violist were the only musicians left, and so, out of necessity, Haydn created the string quartet, which is structurally just the same as a symphony, with 4 movements, the first movement fast, usually in sonata form, the second movement slow, the third movement a minuet and trio format, and finally a fast 4th movement. Well, Haydn's idea of the quartet caught on, and he was asked to write several others, and so throughout his career he became identified with string quartets. Let me play you a little example of one of them. This is a theme and variations, a second movement from one of his string quartets, later known as the Emperor Quartet. Haydn was famous throughout Europe, giving concerts in London. That's where he wrote his Surprise Symphony. It's also Haydn who was made amazed by a new young composer and musician named Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Haydn said to Mozart's father in a letter, "Sir, your son is the greatest musician known to me either by name or reputation." While still a child, Mozart traveled Europe as a musical phenomenon, both playing and composing. What you're listening to right now is a little theme and variations that Mozart based around a song he heard called "A vous dirai-je maman." We think of it as "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" or "Baa, Black Sheep." Here's the theme. Now comes a variation. When Mozart was an adult, he moved to Vienna and became a musical sensation all over again. No longer the child prodigy, but the sensational, mature composer. What you're listening to right now is an excerpt from his opera, The Marriage of Figaro, a wonderful work about servants being a little smarter than their noble masters, a revolutionary idea in France where the story came from, and a little bothersome in Austria because the Austrian emperor was the brother of poor Queen Marie Antoinette, who was bothered by such stories in France. At any rate, The Marriage of Figaro is still regarded as one of the greatest of all operas. It's about love, about redemption, and musically it's just remarkable. Let's enjoy this little section. In the late 1780s, Mozart was able to hear a young pianist from Bonn, Germany, who played so well that Mozart said to the people near him, remember him. He will give the world something to talk about. Well, that young pianist from Bonn was named Ludwig van Beethoven. And Beethoven wanted to study with Mozart, but family emergencies sent him back to Bonn. By the time he returned to Vienna, Mozart had died, and so Beethoven studied with Haydn. One of the things that I really like about this time period is the realization that Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven all knew one another. Beethoven's music embodies, on one hand, almost perfected classicism. As you listen to the first movement of his Fifth Symphony, you hear perhaps the ultimate manifestation of sonata form. His string quartets, including one on my playlist, features a magnificently clear rondo form. And yet, Beethoven took those existing forms and went far beyond what people had done before, so that near the end of his life, his music could rightly be called more romantic than classical, more programmatic and less absolute. Nowhere is this clearer than in his great Ninth Symphony, that last major work of a man who for nearly 20 years had been battling progressive deafness. His Ninth Symphony features 5 movements instead of 4. It has soloists, chorus, and an expanded orchestra, and is still regarded as one of the masterworks in Western civilization. When Beethoven died in 1827, the world of music was forever changed, and he is regarded now as the epitome of music. So there we are. The classical era is the era of Mozart, of Beethoven, of Haydn. The symphony comes into being. Structures like string quartets are created, and the musical forms, which will end up being so powerful and enduring, sonata form that you'll hear about it in other sources, theme and variations, and so many others, all really are part of this period that we call the classical age in music, a time of music for music's sake. And for goodness sake, let's talk again.